I never thought that I would be a leader. My life didn't change all at once. How do we evaluate success? My faith struggles, and there were three of them, I wish I knew. For the first time in my life, I realized what Jesus was saying.
Welcome back to another session on Conversations from Below. Last time when we sat down and we were online, we talked about Bull's triple death. And today we're going to see how we can turn hope and ultimately the lesson of the story of the resurrection. It's all about putting together these experiences and understanding. And today with us, we have Peter Tarantal from South Africa. As many of the people you will meet on these conversations, they are not just readers of the book, but they are also good friends and people that have walked many years with Bull Taylor. And it's good for us to have you with us today, Peter. And yeah, we're looking forward to the session. And the theme of today's discussion is all about the resurrection from the ashes, finding new life in the transition. So, as with the previous sessions, again, I want to just help us to get focused, and I want to read us a short little passage from the book and about the hope in this transition. And it reads like this. In that momentous June 1986 Singapore gathering of the World Evangelical Alliance General Assembly, I assumed leadership of the Mission Commission of the WEA. I knew in my deepest heart that God has searched me with the resurrection papers. And that's what happened. Resurrection materialized. New life emerged from strange ashes. It was a powerful piece of scripture, realizing that, so many things kind of came to an end, and then that moment of resurrection that took place. So I want to jump straight to you, Peter. That moment in Singapore obviously was a strategic pivot in the launch of the 3 decades of global influence, which you obviously experienced as well through your relationship with Uncle Bull Taylor. Yet it also followed with immense personal loss. As a strategist yourself, what is one of those key questions about the resurrection that you might have or burn to ask for someone like Bill Taylor?
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Adrian. It's so great to be with you and with Bill. I think, Bill, I met you in 2003. I'm not sure if you can remember that, at Trinity College in Canada, at the WEA Mission Commission
Yes.
in Canada. I felt, if I'm honest, just like a young guy and outside all these giants who were there. And I felt so intimidated. But you went out of your way to make me feel at home and welcomed. This young guy from Africa. I'm not so young anymore. But so that was the beginning phase of my journey with the Mission Commission, and just watching you from a distance. My next meeting, by the way, was in 2006. No, it may have. When did we have the Pattaya Mission Commission meetings?
2009.
Was it 2009? After that,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
So, and just the way you, by the way, I'm sure you're going to do the transition thing. The way in 2006, Bill, that you transitioned. I'm going to get back to this chapter, by the way, Adrian. Sorry that I'm, yeah. But in 2006, when you handed over to Bertil, it was so well done. What was it like for you? Was it an easy handover, or you just knew it was time?
Oh, Peter, so good to see you again. Um, and uh, when we met in the Vancouver area in 2003, Let's see, I had started with the Mission Commission in what year? 86. I had no idea what I was getting into. I did not understand World Evangelical Alliance. I knew David Howard. He had been my mentor since Urbana 67, and had been a personal friend who had taught me so much. His sister is Elizabeth Elliot, the wife of one of the martyrs of Ecuador. And it was at his invitation. He's the only one that understood what Yvonne and I were going through when we left Latin America permanently to move to what I thought would be my whole life, active life, on the faculty at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, TEDS, north of Chicago. But I had never thought that I was a leader. And yet leadership came to me, and I felt somehow that I was supposed to respond positively, take on these new assignments, and then go back to where I was in the past, which I did in Latin America. And then there were a couple times when they said, well, now that you've taken on that assignment, we want you to move to the next step. And that would have been a theoretical promotion in status and authority and leadership at the seminary in Guatemala. But somewhere around 2002, I had this sense, Peter, that I had taken the Mission Commission as far as I could.
Wow.
I know that we had had a series of conversations. David Ruiz was very strategic in his thinking. There were others. I have the photographs of those people. Bertil was crucial. And we met in England. We met in the Netherlands and some other country to say, okay, how does the Mission Commission need to become more than it is? Are we a network? Are we a federation? Are we an alliance? What are we? And so that was it at the beginning of sensing that we are a network, but with the services of an alliance.
Yeah, sure.
So there were staff, there were programs, there were trainings, there were events, there were publications, there were equippings. But as we came to that consultation in 2003, I realized that I had come to the end. I didn't know what to do, Peter. And so I said, Lord, I think I'm going to step down because I don't have the gifts or the insight to say how do we transform into the future. So that was K. Rajendran's first meeting as chair of the Mission Commission because David Lee had stepped down. And Kay will never forgive me, although he's now in heaven, so he's probably forgiven me. But he said the first item I had to deal with was your resignation. And he said that was a very discouraging first meeting for me. But what I wanted to set in motion was a slow process of saying, who are we? What is the profile of the position? And what is the profile of the person that's to lead this? And John Lewis was a very, very clear strategist, very keen thinker. He said, Bill, we need to name somebody from inside and not from the outside. Because there were recommendations. Well, this person is really good and Kenya has no background, so he comes in with no prejudices and no nothing. And the feeling was, no, that would be a serious mistake. So that was 2003, and then 2006, we had the transition. We went through a 3-year process.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And that was the assurance that Bertil was the one to take over, but I abstracted myself from the decision making. I wanted to have a hand in the profile and the description of the job, but I did not want to have a hand in the selection so that I would never be blamed for selecting that person. But secondly, nobody could accuse me of stacking the deck in favor
Yeah.
of my friend Bertil.
Yeah.
So then Bertil and I worked on the transition in South Africa, and I wanted to make that a series of experiences, but especially the very clear transfer of authority. One of the issues that we discuss is, should that decision have been made the first night or the first full day? And the sense is, no, not the first day nor the last day, but in the middle. That way we can launch, and I would be the recognized leader, but we know that we're coming to a critical moment mid consultation there in Gaudini Spa, and Bertil would assume the leadership. And what's so interesting now that I think about it is that God is witness, and my wife also, that I never wished I had postponed that decision.
Sure.
I never wanted to
Sure.
say, wow, Bertil is doing a really bad job. I think I need to clean this up. But Bertil was a big man, and he
Yeah.
said to me, as I take over, would you be my mentor for 3 years?
Wow.
And then in 3 years, release me. And
No, that's good.
and
Yeah.
so actually, during those days, he had some extremely difficult decisions. We had to dismiss somebody from leadership of the Mission Commission, and that was Bertil's first executive decision.
Yeah. Welcome.
Uh,
Hey,
That's all the background.
yeah,
yeah.
Uncle Bill, I think as I listened to you, obviously we continue to go through phases of transition, and that was a major transition phase. I'm reminded of our road trip that we did for 10 days through Botswana, and our topic was liminal space.
Yeah.
And obviously that was a moment of liminal space as you went through the transition. I quickly want to jump back. I mean,
Yeah.
this is
Let
a
me just.
good way on how you exit, but I want to go back to when you entered into it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Obviously, you just came from a space, as in the previous discussion, the triple death, and you had to make some decisions as into going forward now. How difficult is it to hang on until you know what to say yes for and what to say no for? That spiritual discipline that needs to come with that, because it can be so easy now that you've gone through this triple death to just say yes for anything that comes up.
Yeah.
I think most leaders are struggling with that idea. What do I say yes for? What do I say no for after such an experience?
Yeah, it's there was a series of farewells, the deaths, leaving Latin America. I thought I would die in Latin America. I mean, I had selected my burial plot. Our organization had some real estate in the National Cemetery, and I said, if there's an empty niche up above, I'll just go there when I die. And so I never thought I would leave Latin America. And what's more, I honestly did not like the United States. I called it the frozen tundras of godlessness. And I said, I'll go anywhere except the United States. And that's when my wife dealt lovingly and firmly with me. And she said, Bill, in the last 2 years or so, you've received 12, 13 invitations to do something, and they're all in the United States. And you've taken them all as a test of your call to Latin America. What if it's the opposite? What if God wants you to go where you do not want to go? Remember Jonah.
Yeah.
And so that flipped everything over. And fortunately, I have the capacity to flip. And sometimes I end up on my back, sometimes I end up on my head, other times I end up on my feet. That one I ended up on my feet, and I said, okay, God, what is it going to be? But then when teaching at the seminary was phenomenal for me. I mean, I was in heaven, but it wasn't good for the family. And again, David Howard said to me, Bill, any decision that you make that's hard, that's costly, but that blesses your family is a decision that God will bless you also.
Mm.
And if that means leaving Ted's, where you have your whole future in front of you, then it means stepping into the darkness and the unknown, and God will reveal that. Little did I know that maybe God had already given David the vision that I might fit the mission commission. At that time, it was under the leadership of Theodore Williams of India, but there was really no leadership. There were about 25 people at that General Assembly, and ironically, I just found the picture as we started our discussion. This is 86, the General Assembly. Whoever took the photograph is an extremely ungifted photographer. It's a terrible photograph, but that's a piece of my memory. Uh,
Absolutely.
and so I arrived in Singapore, and David greeted me. I arrived there late at night. He said, "We're having lunch with Theodore Williams tomorrow, so I'll see you tomorrow." And so I had lunch, um, and then Theodore Williams said, "We want to ask you to take over the mission commission." I said, "What's the mission commission?"
Hmm.
But as that conversation unfolded, and I wrote a description of my job from what they were saying, and I wrote it on the paper placemat of that Novotel Orchid Hotel in Singapore, and I still have that very same paper.
My goodness. Wow.
Um, I realized that maybe the stone that covered my cemetery plot was starting to shift.
Mm.
I called Yvonne back in America, and she said, I will call our prayer team and ask them, tell them what's happening, ask them to pray." And so I said, well, better let them know quickly because they want a decision by tomorrow. The next day was our anniversary, the 30th of June. And so I called to wish my wife a happy anniversary. And she said, I want to give you the report from everybody unanimously on the prayer team. I said, well, what is it? They said, everyone says, do not make a decision.
Hmm.
Come back home. We can talk about it. We can pray about it. And then you can consider, should you do this or not? I was crucified. I was just nailed because I said, well, honey, I'm being presented tonight,
Wow. Wow.
appointed by the International Council of WEA. And she hung up the telephone. I just heard the phone go click. I found Dave Howard immediately. I said, David, you must call Yvonne because this is what's happened. He said, let me talk to her. So he called her in America and she listened to him and she said, well, okay, then we'll have to talk about when he gets back. Um, but in my gut,
Mm.
somehow I knew that the stone was moving.
Yeah, sure. That's such a powerful way of describing it, Bill, right? And the stone was moving. And I think that's such an apt description for when you know. I mean, this chapter deals with resurrection and new life and new things. And here's one of the questions that I have for you. You mentioned Theodore Williams and Dave Howard, in that they nominated you. They felt comfortable to pursue you. Coming out of this this experience of yours in Latin America, in the US, etc., and this thing of death and resurrection, what do you think they saw in you, in your failure and in your grief, that they believed that you would bring this component to a struggling organization? What is that thing that you think they saw in you?
I weep.
Hmm.
The memory is as crisp as if it were yesterday. My first response to Theodore Williams was, Theo, this is a step backward.
Hmm.
From India, what we today call the global South, the majority world, I think at that time it was still the third world. I think I just said, you're from India, and I'm a North American. And I saw Howard getting ready to say something. Theodore said, but you're not a typical American.
Hmm.
You were born in Latin America, and we see things from you that are more Latin American than North American.
Mhm.
And in time, it was clear that if the Mission Commission is of the World Evangelical Alliance, it needed somebody who understood global North and global South.
Yeah.
Bertil was a step further into that, although we were both third culture kids.
Hmm.
He was taken to Brazil as a very, very young child, and the ship that he was on had a fire and was sunk off the shores of Brazil. So he has a story to tell. But Theo saw something in me um, that I did not understand until many years later. And there's a thing in Spanish, a saying that somebody has in Spanish a don de gentes, and it means the gift of peoples,
Hmm.
the ability to relate to a variety of people, whether wealthy or poor, whether in power or powerless, whether pastors or lay people, or of different cultures. Uh, and and that's something that Theo saw.
Yeah. Right.
Now, I also made some mistakes right about that same time, and that comes later in another chapter, because I dealt with a Japanese brother as if he were Latin American. And in his large church in Seoul, Korea, where I was to speak, when I greeted him, had been at the General Assembly and invited me because I was going back through Tokyo, not Korea. And he said, I want you to speak Wednesday night. We have the service. And when I saw him again at his church, I gave him this big hug as a Latin American. And then I saw everybody around him was just shocked. And then I realized what I had done. I said, oh, you dumb ass, donkey, failure. And so I broke it off immediately and I bowed as low as I could bow and just stayed in shame and then just stood up and said, forgive me. I come from Latin America. So I remember that all too well. But Dave Howard saw something beyond because he had seen me in action in Latin America.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, And he's the only one in North America that understood what Yvonne and I were going through that we knew personally.
Hmm. And it's a gift, as someone once said to a friend of mine, you are equally at home under a tree as in the boardrooms of Washington. And I think you exude that and you
Yeah.
embody that. So
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Your endorsement was very beautiful, and uh, I'm going to go back and read it in a minute. But you said something that was very, very touching to me, and I said, "Oh, I wish I could be that person."
mm, well,
Uncle
we
Bill, as a mentee, that had a person that had the privilege of being mentored by you over the years, I've obviously learned that God's direction often requires your readiness. And so, if I just listen to your story just being shared again, what would be your advice for a young leader that today might face some unexpected loss, a failed project or a failed report, a profession that might come to an end? What could be the advice for such a person to help them to be ready for this next assignment that God might have in store for them?
Oh, Adrian, I wish I had a clearer answer to that. Um, I've watched some leaders that are able to stay in the same organization their whole life. Peter, you're an example of that. But OM is big enough
mm,
that it has spaces for people like Peter in their older years. Uh, uh, George Verwer himself, there
mm,
was a space. George had an orbit that only George could circulate in and around. Campus Crusader crew today is that big also. The Wycliffe Bible translators or Summer Institute of Linguistics or those entities, they are big enough to open up avenues
mm,
for other people, so you can sort of go from the cradle to the grave.
yes.
Um, uh, I think if I had wanted to, I could have kept on as head of the Mission Commission. Nobody was saying leave.
Mm,
Uh, but that's where my father's prophetic word when I was leaving Latin America was leave when they want you to stay instead of trying to stay and they want you to leave.
yeah.
Uh, and so when I turned it over to Bertil, uh, that was a resurrection. That was a liberation.
Mm,
Mm.
Uh, and then I served Bertil as best as I could, and then he gave me other assignments. So it meant another 10 years until he himself steps down. I think that I'm talking with somebody right now who is going through uh, a major crisis, very, very difficult. And the question that I've asked him is, okay, you're 53 years old, and your life has had different ups and downs or different trajectories. Let's use the assignments or trajectories. So before I went to Latin America, I served for 3 years on the staff of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, evangelism, discipleship, apologetics with university students in the midst of American Western modernity.
mm,
Then I go to Latin America. We're based there for 17 years. Well, that was a longer, the 3 year period was short, but I wanted to leave that well,
mm,
and I did. The 17 years was a longer assignment. Uh, and frankly, there were some people that I had to work with down there that I didn't want to work with. And I know that there are some of my colleagues that were rather glad that Taylor is leaving.
mm, mm.
Well, I shared their happiness. Um, and then that was when my father said, also, leave in a way that they will invite you back.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Wow. Profound.
That's interesting. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm not going to explain this. If you don't understand it. And that was my father. My father had these cryptic sayings that he never explained. They were just prophetic,
Yeah.
short sayings.
Mm.
So someone else who, I mean, I've been reprimanded for things, especially early on in my ministry. And actually, another one not too long ago, so it's not over, Taylor. I think that if somebody is dismissed from a job, let's say a pastoral ministry, or even another job in the marketplace or whatever, technology or farming or whatever, or an aspect of ministry, uh, that's a time of great introspection. It's a time to ask, what is God's agenda in my life?
Sure.
Mhm.
What I didn't want to do was to end with a sour taste and a bitterness towards individuals.
Mm.
I came close to that. I could feel the bile coming up out of my unrested stomach, and I said, "No, Taylor, no, 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 don't go that way."
Mhm.
But the question that I asked this friend who's for whom things are falling apart is, in the longer arc of your life, where do you see that God has been present? And this difficult passage that you're in now, how does that converse dialogue with the longer arc? Um, I'm if As someone who's 85, and if this arc is an 85-year-old arc, well, I'm over here. I'm actually planning on 5 more years, and we'll see what happens after that. But I stop every year now and pause. Am I supposed to
Mhm.
continue?
Mm.
Or no, not the way I've done it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Sure.
and
It's
then
actually just
the spiritual discipline in these times. I was thinking about that, Adrian, because that's one of your questions. Um, Two things, and I don't think this is a spiritual discipline, but it's something that God used me. Was Taylor, shut up, or in polite language, the Lord says, Bill Taylor, be quiet. Just be
Mhm.
quiet.
Mm.
In my worst time, right after we moved to Texas in 1990, when I was in a spiritual desert, Yvonne was in the dark night of the soul. She said to me, this is also in the book, Bill, I need to say something to you, that you're very gifted, but you're thin.
Mm.
Uh, you know, Sheesh, I'm on the ground, I'm in the desert, I'm plastered, and my wife tells me I'm thin, which means there's no density to me, there's no substance to me. But it's one of those things, Adrian, that I felt the dagger just go right into my heart.
Wow.
And she didn't turn it, she just left it there. And I essentially said, well, honey, what do I need to be saved? She said, well, here are your assignments for the next couple of years. You need to be reading things that are more substantial and not the spy novels.
Yes.
Sure.
And there
Yeah,
was, go on.
yeah. No, I thank you for that. I think it's so fitting, thinking about the next session, as we will talk about the reflective practitioner. And it's exactly as you just explained. You know, there come times in a life that you have to pause, you have to be quiet, and you have to reflect, so that you can become a better practitioner in that which you are doing. And
Yeah.
and at that end, that we are unfortunately coming to the end of this session. And like all the other sessions, there's so much more that can be discussed. And that's why, to all our viewers, you need to get hold of the book. If you have not yet got, if you don't have a copy of the book yet, down in the description below, there are links. Follow the links. Get yourself a copy, whether it's a hard copy or an e-version, doesn't matter. Get yourself a copy and enrich yourself with some of these stories and experiences. Peter, thank you so much for your time and for your contribution in the conversation. Uncle Ball, once again, thank you so much. And to all our viewers, next time, make sure you have subscribed, and we look forward to the reflective practitioner, continuous learning and growth. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bless you.
Thank you.